Hey Peyton, nice to see you again on this beautiful day. And this time with a quote by Maya Angelou again, where she writes, "It's one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself to forgive. Forgive everybody." Peyton, how to forgive everybody and why is it one of the greatest gifts there is?
Hey, man. Great to be back with you. Yeah, forgiveness is in some way the art of freeing ourselves from the bind and the contraction and the cut offness from the flow that we experience, the aloneness that we experience when we are caught up in judgment or feelings of condemnation toward others. It's not actually good for us to wrap ourselves up in anger. There is this experience that we can all relate to that holding on to anger for somebody else is like grasping a hot coal in our hand, getting ready to throw it at somebody else. We hurt ourselves so much more. And we are the primary consequence bearer of our own perpetual, inevitable, sometimes inability to forgive others, of our own holding on to grudges or judgment or condemnation. The other analogy that's commonly given is it's like filling our mouth with poison because we want to spit it at somebody else, but in fact, we accidentally are swallowing some of the poison and poisoning ourselves with this intention to hold a grudge against somebody else. And forgiveness is there's nuance to it. It's not the same as forgetting. It's not the same as saying that there was no harm to begin with, or there was no damage to begin with, or there is no boundary that must be held. We can forgive in our heart while we still need to put up some serious walls in our life to prevent further harm from happening, or while we speak the truth about what has happened and what must be different in the future because of it. These things are ultimately compatible, but they require a lot of discernment of us. How do we strike the right balance between being responsible stewards of our own lives, of our own selves, and putting up the adequate protection or boundaries or systems in our life so that we can continue to be who we aspire to be or who we must be for those that depend on us, while still recognizing that the strong temptation that we have to wrap our heart around in anger or ill will toward other people is misguided and it's self harming ultimately. It is a barrier to our own freedom. And until we do actually forgive in our heart, not merely with words or sentences, but actually untie the knots that we feel in our chest, we will never be free. And so it is an opportunity to free ourselves that is sometimes so hard to take. What do you think is the primary reason that we find it? Even if we recognize that, yes, ultimately I am holding on to a hot coal right now.
Mhm.
Sometimes we can see that and we still have so much trouble letting go of the hot coal. Why is that? And how can we be better at forgiving when it's really hard for us to forgive?
Because, well, thank you for your insights. And I think it's so hard because it is irreversible. Some human actions are irreversible, and damage once done cannot be undone. And trust, which is lost, cannot be regrown just on the same soil, you know? It's like it is this tightness towards consequences of the actions of someone's which happened in the past. So it is a real consequence which emerged from interactions in the past. And because they have real consequences which are even still felt, maybe there are scars, maybe there are traumas to be worked on, maybe there are like people who lost people because of actions of someone else. So it is so hard because it is real irreversibility in some actions. And there are two types of actions, some which are reversible and you can easily undo them. And there are some actions which are irreversible and which can even lead to ruin of some of the involved people. So it is so extremely hard because the pain is so extremely real. Pain stays real. The past stays real as long as you don't forgive, so to say. But forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, like you said as well. It is still important to pronounce the accountability. You do not release people of their accountability, and you do not just forgive them prematurely, because then the victimhood can iterate on and on and on, and the people do not learn anything. But you forgive more easily if the person who's done you wrong, for example, shows at least some regret, so that there can be like a renewal of the relationship you once had with the past, or with the person, and so on. So it is still extremely hard, even if it's better for you and your mind, even if it's better for your whole life and for your inner peace to forgive. But what makes it so hard is the real pain which it inflicted onto your souls and onto your experience and onto your emotions. So it is hard, and it is like one of the greatest acts, therefore, one can do, because it's so hard. But still, it frees yourself. You're within the act of freeing yourself from the pain which is inflicted by you yourself holding on to the past, which cannot be changed anymore. And therefore, it's so powerful.
Holding on to the past is a good pointer. We really do give the events that we've experienced, the negative events in our life, so much more of a grip on us when we do not forgive. It's conjuring the memories of the past events into more of a felt and binding reality now when we wrap ourselves up in judgment or condemnation. And it is really hard sometimes. I think what can make it especially difficult is when somebody strikes a particular nerve with us. Maybe there's some cycles of projection that can underlie our most fire-fueled anger. If we have some judgment toward something within ourselves or something within ourselves, it can make it especially difficult for us to recognize that the stories and narratives and feelings and emotions we have toward some person or some situation are not objective reality, and they don't have to hold us in this tight grip like they do. Projection can blind us, and our own self-judgments are the ground in which projection is rooted. I think that it's hard too when we still anticipate more of whatever is behind our grievance in the future or even in the immediate future. When we feel like we're going to have to defend ourselves again tomorrow, how hard can it be to allow tomorrow to arise spontaneously and not to pre-weave our defenses today? Which has a lot to do with trust and faith. Do we have the trust that tomorrow will worry about itself, and that there will be some wisdom that will be there for us tomorrow in the moment that we need it, to where we don't have to pre-rehearse and pre-plan all of our statements and 95 theses in our mind thoroughly in advance, so that we feel like we have a shield in front of us and we can protect ourselves with our words and our narratives. Fear is oftentimes at the root, or some form of fear is oftentimes disguised and at the root of the anger that can make it so hard for us to unclench our heart. And so how do we move past this? We see how hard it is. We see that in our own experience and in many others, that even though I've seen 100 times how much it blocks me from the flow, how much it blocks me from freedom, how much it blocks me from being who I'm capable of being when I'm caught up in these cycles of judgment, condemnation, anger, resentment, and begrudging, how much I know intellectually and from experience over and over and over. I know that I must forgive others to free myself. I know that I should not hold on to this hot coal, even if it's not for the other person entirely, although this is an element that's not to be ignored. Even if it's just acting out of selfish interest, I know that I must forgive, and that I should forgive, and that it serves me to forgive. And yet sometimes it is hard, even when we have this intention, to follow our own intention. Even when we believe that we should, we know that we should, we want to, and we try to. Sometimes in our heart, it is difficult to do. How can we move forward? What is the right relationship with this? And what are the mindset shifts that might be available to us to help us when we feel stuck or struggling or challenged with this?
That's a very, very beautiful question. I think there's a part of it is detachment, the practice of how good are you at detaching yourself from the emotion and the inner turmoil, which will be stirred up inevitably if some of your triggers get activated. And forgiveness is, so to say, the highest form of detachment, but with kind of a relationship to the reality involved in it. And what I see is that, for example, if you're aware of the pain and the consequences which come inevitably from interacting with some people, awareness first is always the key in recognizing what does what to you. Like, what is it? What triggers you? Why is it that someone triggers you with that, what he or she says? If you get aware, if you become aware of that, it's much easier to recognize it for what it is and see reality for what it is. It's easier to don't hold on to grudges and release of the secondary and second order feeling of revenge. Anger can come and go, but you yourself also have the responsibility of being able to command for how long this anger will rage within you. So this is totally okay if that comes up, because we all want to self-preserve, and therefore we can just see and be aware of it when it comes up. And then we do not have to dive into the feeling of revenge and then plan how could we hurt the person who hurt us. So this is totally in our control if we are aware of the trigger moments. And the most important step, in my opinion, after that is develop some empathy in terms of see the vine grape for what it is, see the pear tree for what it is, see the apple tree for what it is. It will bear fruit which is within their possibilities and their potential, and within the output which they already have shown to you. So
Nice.
it is about our expectations and our projections ourselves, from trying to project a golden version of other people into the future and trying to lead them to this image. But therefore, also we have to be detached from our own projection. We have to see that it is a projection of ours and be detached of the outcome. We can invite them to fulfill this image which we paint and communicate to them. Hey, what if we would have like a great conversation about that? What if we would show respect to each other while we have this conversation about this very hard topic? What if we have it as a rule not to hurt ad hominem ourselves? And you could project this image, but don't be attached to this outcome, because of your experience, you already know with a high likelihood what this person will produce. So if you develop this empathy towards the person, but also the relationship to the reality of the person, you will have a much better chance of really being detached of the things which they do to you, and be detached from how it makes you feel, because you know, hey, I could expect that as well if I would take a look into the eyes of reality. And there's this a story before I want to ask you how you think being forgiven can restore connections and forgiving can bring the space for restoring connection. There's this metaphor of this empty boat where a guy paddles up a river and a big boat comes towards him and says, hey, watch out. And then nothing happens. He says, hey, I'm here. Don't you see me? And then the boat totally rams him. And then he says, oh, I'm so angry at you. Why didn't you see me? Why didn't you do anything? And then later he discovers there's nobody in the boat. All his rage, everything, all his anger
Mhm.
was for nothing, because all his anger couldn't change anything about the reality that this
Mm.
was empty. So it is the same thing when you hit your knee against a chair, whatever. It hurts. It's shit, but you cannot be angry, and anger doesn't change anything. So it's much easier to detach from empty things, and therefore you can project onto the people who do you harm. They are also empty boats because we are almost robots, like doing our
Mm.
programs and living our life because we don't know what we do. And that's why Jesus also said, Lord, forgive them because they don't know what they do. They're all empty
Yes.
robots. Maybe that's not what Jesus said, but along the lines of it. So how do you think, Peyton, connections can be restored through the process of forgiving? And how is it even possible to do it better?
Well, you already pointed to some of the things that I find the most helpful to remember when grappling with this. And I think thematically, the two ways that we can be tempted to address this, insofar that we do even try to forgive, is we can try to find forgiveness with paths of untruth or blindness or covering up. And this is just avoiding, this is denying and kind of gaslighting ourselves that what happened was actually okay, or that it's not a big deal, or there was no harm. This could be just trying to cover it up and just say that I forgive with words without actually feeling it or trying to connect to it in my body. And this can be just holding our tongue when we really are out of integrity by not speaking the truth. These are trying to find forgiveness via ways of untruth. And what I found in my own experience, and I think all of us have tried all of this stuff, is it's not sustainable. It's not integrated. And if we try to just repress how we feel about something, it will burst out in unproductive ways, and it will lead to this inner resentment and this inner conflict that we feel, where our system is at war within ourselves and not integrated because we have not allowed truth to flow. And truth not merely in words and language, but truth of our intuition, experience. We're out of integrity. This is a pitfall of trying to find forgiveness the wrong way. Finding forgiveness the right way must always be grounded in truth, must always be grounded in truth. And this doesn't necessarily mean that we have to write out and give our whole argument for everything to the person and convince them and get them to admit that we were right all along. This is not what I mean by grounded in truth. What I mean, though, is there are core fundamental aspects of reality that we can remember and see again and access that can give us perspective on the situations that we're in, that can provide a powerful antidote for the resentment, anger, and bitterness that's holding on to the hot coal that we experience. One of them that you pointed out is ignorance. Remembering, Lord, forgive them for they know not what they do, is real. And this ignorance causes them to suffer, as you mentioned. So this is remembering that everybody thinks that they're doing what they quote unquote should do in this moment. Everybody is the protagonist of their own stories. And we are often deceived by ourselves, by our narratives, by our stories, by our confusion. And to the extent that people act out of ignorance and they are deceived, they are suffering. People that harm other people, generally speaking, are not having a good day. They're not actually having a good time in there. And so we oftentimes have this starting point of this situation is very win-lose. We are losing, they're winning at our expense. But in reality, deep down, subjectively, in their own experience, somebody that is harming you or lying or living dishonestly or creating chaos in their life and yours and is living out of alignment with integrity, they are not thriving because of this. Oftentimes, they are suffering even more than you are, surprisingly, even if they may conceal that from you. There is this empathy to be regained in this. There's also the truth that many times these are not as big of a deal as it seems to us at first. That, yes, I'm so worked up about this situation, this grievance that I feel towards somebody, but am I going to be thinking about this in a year? Am I going to be thinking about this in 5 years? Is this really as big of a deal? Is this really as important as I'm making it out to be when I'm saying that the principle is what's wrong? Probably not. Probably I can have a broader perspective on my ability to weather whatever is going on that can be more grounded in truth than my angry narratives would tend to tell me. The other truths are that we cannot control others and that whatever is done in the past is already baked into reality. Whatever is done, whatever exists now in the present is already reality. Whatever has already arrived is non-negotiable. We can only do what's within our control right now. And that doesn't mean we can go back and change somebody else's past behaviors or transgressions because we're resisting them strong enough. It completely is futile, and we're harming ourselves by doing so while not realizing that we're harming ourselves. And then, furthermore, there is no ultimate separating out what this person is acting out versus what they're experiencing and the genes with which they're born. We're all acting out nature and nurture and circumstances and movements and momentums. There's atoms and chemistry moving around in our brains, and there's confusion and blindness that causes us to act reflexively and react to what's going on, to where there's point of view we can have to where this person didn't actually choose to be who they are ultimately. Yes, they made many choices and had many intentions along the way, but where was the first choice and the intention, and what led to that? And then what led to the one after that? This is all circumstances reacting with chemistry. This is all atoms moving around. And we can see that they are experiencing this ride from the inside. They are experiencing their volitions and movements, of course, and their thoughts and their actions, and great pain, of course. But there is no ultimate them choosing the thoughts that they think, them choosing the things that they want. Ultimately, they're not upstream of who they are. And we can remember that we're all kind of just playing out this human drama as animals that's just kind of watching the show, even as we feel like we're upstream and pulling the strings. There is no free will in the decisions that people make to harm other people. They're compelled to do so by the cycles within their own mind, and they are inevitably tied up in the negative energy that they create. And so we can at least have less of a blaming, less of an ultimate, you are culpable for everything you do in our mindset, when we can recognize that all of this is nature and nurture unfolding in every moment, including the things that we do that we judge ourselves for. We can really learn rationally, based in truth and science and reason, to have a looser and looser grip on our concepts of culpability in an ultimate sense, even as we can see that, okay, if there's a grizzly bear in front of me that just attacked me, they might attack me again, and I better get behind a barrier or put a weapon in my hand to defend myself or do whatever I need to get this danger out of my life. That's completely rational within all of this and within the truth. But having this, I'm just furious at this grizzly bear and I'm going to be pissed at him for the rest of my life and I'm going to plot my revenge and make him suffer. This has no place in a reality, and this has no place in a truly awake, conscious view of reality and how these things play out in our behavior and in others. And so finding forgiveness that's grounded in truth, that's grounded in our body, grounded in our experience, and is, I would say, a dynamic and unfolding experience. It's much more of a dance than it is a decision. Maybe it's a dance that starts with a decision, and then we actually have to go through our own form of processing, of reconciling with ourselves, of reckoning, of integration with all of this. This is a process that is not easy. There's a reason why Jesus had to teach us this in 10,000 different ways. And I would say, as my final note, just me personally, that is when I find it really difficult to forgive, that Jesus's teachings are what I have to go back to. The teaching of, for example, the servant that's forgiven 10,000 talents by his master, and then he goes, finds somebody that owes him just a tiny, tiny fraction of that, and he strangles him over it. And this hypocrisy that we seem to is easy to have on being very judgmental of others while we ourselves have erred in many ways in our life. This is helpful, and the reminder that if we do not forgive, we will not be forgiven. He did not stutter when he said this. This is absolutely essential. If we are going to be integrated, if the divine is going to flow through us, if we are going to feel peace and freedom and happiness, we do not have a choice but to forgive. We must take the practice and the act and the effort over and over in our path of working to forgive in our heart. This is not optional for us. It's so difficult sometimes, but it is so essential if we are going to live in alignment, if we are going to be free, if we are going to feel joy, if we are going to feel flow. We must unclench our hearts and allow forgiveness to soften us in the way that it needs to soften us.
Mhm.
How about you, my friend? Any closing thoughts on this theme, this challenge that we have, this this difficult balance to strike as Homo sapiens in a complicated world?
Yeah, man. You filled the ground very well, and it has to be grounded in truth. And the thing about it is, there's this loop going on in both of our minds, like the forgiver and the forgiven. If the forgiver, being a forgiver, grabs onto this hot coal and hurts himself still, but also the one who shall be forgiven, the guy who did something wrong maybe, and then even he himself is like looping his thoughts about the thing. So the act of forgiveness is a whole new area of giving the potential to heal a relationship, to put some common ground and break the cycle of negativity after a conflict. And so this space to heal is also a responsibility. If we want to heal a relationship, it's also a responsibility of each of us. So even if I did something wrong and now I think about it, because I had this thinking and I was like, I did something not really okay to a person, and I was like ruminating about it. But recently I asked for an honest apology. And the best way to apologize is probably if you realize that this was wrong. I didn't know it at that time, but after reflecting, I thought, judging from my today's standard, that was not so nice to do.
Mm,
And I was like ruminating about it, but then I asked for an apology sincerely. It was like healing the relationship again, in terms of, well, okay, realizing that there's people, both of them don't know what they do or what they did, and both of them just seeking common ground and seeking kind of a relationship on a new ground. Offering that apology healed this rumination for me, but also asking for apology, I needed to like put away my ego for that, because it's so
mm,
easy to tell yourself, oh, that was not wrong and so on. But knowing that there is the potential for relationships of being healed by an act of courage, in terms of you putting away your ego and putting away their ego to find forgiveness, which heals the relationship again, which loosens the grip on the hot coals, which releases the stress, which releases the grip of the past over what can happen in the future, which is like a reshuffling of the possibilities which the future yields. Therefore, it's like a powerful tool to shape reality, the ability to forgive and the ability to ask for an apology. It's
mm.
kind of the ability to seek connection with our humanity, with each other, and therefore a very, very powerful tool. Well, Peyton, I have the intention of increasing my awareness and seeing through the pain and seeing through the wrong and releasing the grip of the past over my new future. Thank you very much for this wonderful conversation. Anything else you want to share?
And I'll tell you, this one's challenging. This one's challenging. I have an intention to do my best to come back to the greater truths that can put my grievances in a clearer and truer perspective. Practice this over and over. Forgive, to forgive, to forgive, to forgive. This is my intention, and I hope that when I fall blind in my own path in this, that I will come back to seeing clearly, that I will come back to balance with this, that I will come back to forgiveness over and over. This is a practice, and I feel in my heart convicted to grow in this area. It's an area that I sincerely want to continue to grow. And so I will look forward to doing my best, taking my step forward, trying to have faith and asking for help, asking the Spirit for help when I feel like I can't do it enough on my own. For me, it is praying about it, praying and asking for help and support in this in my heart. So that is my intention this week, to do my best and ask for support. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you very much, man. Pleasure to see you again.
Talk to you in the next one.
Talk to you soon.
Likewise.
Bye bye.
Likewise.